Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome back to Black Birders Week 2021, hashtag in advance, hashtag Black Birders Week 2021. I'm very happy to be with you all. My name is Brianna Amingwa. I am one of the co-organizers of the week. If you haven't been with us since last year or you're new, Black Birders Week 2021 is put on by the Black AF and STEM Collective, and we are all about this kind of stuff, sharing with you what Black conservationists are up to, what Black outdoor lovers are up to, and how we engage with nature. So this is our kind of banner week of the year, Black Birders Week. And it's a time for us to highlight and to really get the message out. We love to engage with folks online through social media. It is a global campaign. We see folks from all around the country engaging and participating and sharing their stories and their information. And today we have an awesome speaker lined up for you. You might have been with us during the week. We have some great presentations. Earlier today, we heard from Audrey Peterman and Dr. Mamie Parker sharing their stories. Today's theme is On Their Wings. So we want to hear all about the personal side, right? Who connected us to nature? How did they make that connection? Who are the people who are going to carry us off into the future? We have some great giveaways today for youth as well as for adults. There's a silent auction going on. All the information you need is on blackafandstem.com, and you can enter to win, right? So today we're talking with a refuge manager from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. That person is Monica Williams. She's online with me here. And we'll hear from Monica a little bit about her personal connection to nature, how that started, where it all began for her, and then also talk about what she gets up to at the Santee National Wildlife Refuge and why wildlife refuges are so important for our migrating birds and resident birds as well. I'm here with you today from my backyard in Pennsylvania, outside the Philly area. It'd be nice to sit outside. You can hear little birds chirping and things like that. And Monica's at her refuge in the conference room in South Carolina. So with that, I will adjust the screens here so that she can be seen. Gotta remove my pen. And I have some help in the background. Thank you. My tech support here. Thank you, Dara and Sheridan are online. Feel free to engage with us. Let us know where you're watching from. So drop a note in the chat and tell us where you are watching from. It can be inside, outside, with state, city. Tell us a little bit about it while Monica's getting started. So Monica, please go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. I am really glad to be part of this Black Birders Week 2021. As Brianna mentioned, I'm in Summerton, South Carolina, and I'm stationed at the Santee National Wildlife Refuge. For me, it's exciting because what brought me into nature was growing up here in South Carolina. So I grew up in a very small rural town and started off at a very young age, maybe 4 or 5, going fishing with my great-grandmothers who were fisherwomen. And also my great-grandparents had a farm. So I spent a lot of time outside exploring and fishing and picking berries and helping feed cows and chickens and pigs and those kinds of things. So that started off my love for the outdoors and for animals and just how nature works. And then once I get to college, I kind of had a change of heart. I wanted to go into pre-medicine, be a pediatrician. But I decided, once I did that for a little while, a couple of years, I decided to want to do something a little bit different. And so got into environmental science. And eventually that led to an opportunity that the Fish and Wildlife Service had. And so I have been with the Fish and Wildlife Service now for over 20 years, and I have enjoyed a really great career. And so I'm looking forward to talking about some of the work that I do with migratory birds. Birds just kind of fell into my lap, while I grew up on a farm or whatever, other than like the domestic birds, the other birding kind of came with the job. So as I was introduced to Fish and Wildlife Service, I was introduced into the world of birding and have been birding ever since.
Awesome. Thank you, Monica. And I'm curious, did you have a family that was like, used to exploring nature, or were you kind of the outlier that was interested in going out? What was your family like?
Well, I had a mix. We had a mix. We had some people that were, kind of more the outdoorsy folks and interested in exploring. And I had uncles that did some hunting. And then I had other family members that were not so much into the outdoors. So there was kind of a split there, but yeah. So as with most families, so we kind of had a little bit of both.
And since then, have you found that your family, are you the one who's kind of like getting them to come outside and do that kind of thing? Or, you know, because my family, that's how it is for us. Like, they're not really outdoorsy people, but they're willing to do it sometimes with me.
Absolutely. Yes. Yep. So I still have some outdoorsy people. I have a lot of fisher, a lot of anglers, a lot of people that like to fish in my family, and they still do that. But yeah, usually wherever I work, my mom and other family members will come out to the refuge or wherever I'm working so that they can see what I'm doing and learn more about it. And they've been really supportive. So I think I have that family influence too. I can kind of get them to come out and, taking nieces and nephews and little cousins out, birding and to see wildlife. So yeah.
Yeah, I think that's one of the great things about birding is the community that we can create with it. You know, people who may not be familiar with birds might be more interested if they see somebody who's like, "Hey, come with me. Let me go show you a little bit about it." I think that's something that we can all do. And I will tell you, Monica, we got folks watching from Texas, from Atlanta, Georgia, also in the South-ish there with you, Oklahoma, Minnesota Valley National Wildlife Refuge, Serena Selbo's out there, Joshua Tree as far as the West Coast, Texas, and even another person in Alabama and Ohio as well. So welcome in everybody as well. Sorry, I've got a little bit of background noise. Of course, I thought I'd have beautiful nature noises. There goes the trash truck. You know, what can you do? What can you do? Awesome. So let's jump in. I also see somebody here in Philly. Welcome, Garrett, as well. Okay. So thank you for sharing a little bit about kind of your personal background, Monica, and what your family is all about. Um, Let me hear a little bit about what you do now. You're a refuge manager, we know. Just give me a little splash of like a day in the life, and then we can jump into a little bit about what the Fish and Wildlife does for birds too.
Yep. So I'm a fairly new refuge manager. I've been put into some refuge manager leadership positions, but I'm a fairly new official refuge manager about a year now. But my typical day is fluid. It can, at my refuge, I have a pretty small staff, so I do a little bit of everything. There are two other staff here with me. We have buildings that we maintain. So basically I get in my car, I come to work, look at the building, see what's going on. Depending on, what might be going on any day, we have 4 units that you're going to learn more about, 4 management units. And so we go out to those units to do, work for migratory birds and other waterfowl. I might have meetings, with cooperators or partners that you're going to hear more about too. But what I enjoy is that every day is a little bit different. And, as a refuge manager, I definitely have more office and administrative duties now. But I also love the fact that I can get into my refuge truck and go out on my refuge and, just go bird watching or, just look out over the lake or just be outside and enjoy it. So it's always something a little new, something a little different, but I am very much enjoying it. Every now and then we'll have those not so fun issues or controversial issues, but it's okay because we're learning how to navigate and how to work. One thing that I will mention that I found out recently, and I just want to share, because of this space that we're in, this refuge was established back in 1941. And when I got to this office, I looked at a picture frame that had the names of all of the previous refuge managers. And I am the second woman, the second female refuge manager, and I'm the first African-American refuge manager. So
Wow.
to me, I don't take that lightly. So I think this is an awesome opportunity. With COVID, I haven't, I've met some neighbors and cooperators, but I'm very much looking forward to getting out into the community and having school groups come here. And there's some HBCUs nearby. So I look forward to really engaging and connecting in this community a lot more. So I think there's a lot of potential here and it's a great place. And I'm also very happy to be back home in South Carolina after being away in the Northeast for most of my fish and wildlife career.
Well, congratulations. That's a big deal. Being one of the first is a huge thing. Can you talk a little bit, Monica, about, you mentioned that you don't take it lightly. Tell me a little bit more about like how that hits you and what that makes you feel like being the second woman and first African American woman as well.
When I think about this, the Black Birders Week platform, I just realized I feel like I'm a middle-aged, I'm middle-aged. So I feel like, there are those that have gone before me, like Dr. Mamie Parker, Jerome Ford, and others that have gone before me. And I feel like, there are those that are coming, the generation that's coming behind me. So I don't take that lightly in the fact that, we have accomplished a lot. There's certainly a lot more to do in terms of diversity, inclusion, and just, being a part of decision making. And that's one of the things I like about being a manager, is that I can help make decisions and help implement change and
Right.
things that are gonna, not only help the refuge system, but just help us, as the American people. And so I'm looking forward to that. I enjoy mentoring. That's one of the things I love doing. So I enjoy keeping in contact with, interns and technicians and coworkers that I've worked with before. And I do the same thing. I reach forward and I reach out to folks too who mentored me, because it's really important. Like when I saw Dr. Mamie Parker, I can't tell you how happy I was just, to see this successful Black woman who also worked for the Fish and Wildlife Service, and to hear, the stories that she shared and some of the things that she endured. And while I didn't have to endure some of the things that she went through, I know that because she went through them, it might have made it a little bit easier for me. And so for the things that I go through, it's going to make it a little bit easier, or make it a little bit better for the folks that are coming behind me. So this is an awesome opportunity, and I absolutely want to do my best with it. I have a passion for people. I have a passion for wildlife. I love my job and my career. And so that's why I say I don't take it lightly. I am incredibly blessed and fortunate to be in this position.
Yeah, I feel that. I feel that. And there's something to say about like this just legacy that we're creating, right? Starting with Dr. Mamie. I mean, there are folks I'm sure before her too, but she's also been a role model of mine as well. And everything that she went through, so she shared the stories about that too. But we don't have as much to deal with as what she had, but there's still our own battles that we're going through. And I'd like to think, 50 years from now, there'll be other people who are other Black women who come through and they have it even easier because of us, right? So I love it. Thank you for sharing that. And Alicia's in the comments as well. She mentioned she's really happy to meet other Black women in the service, especially in wildlife refuge management. Seeing that change and seeing the photos on the wall, I think, being Black women and being Black people, when you walk into spaces like that and see these pictures on the wall, you're like, okay, well, where do I fit into this, right? The further back you go, the less it looks like you. But I'm really happy to see that slowly starting to change.
Yep.
So with that, let's talk a little bit about your work at the refuge. I think you got a few slides that you wanted to show, just to give us some visuals of what goes on at Santee and how our birds falling into all this as well. So if you want to share your screen, Monica, and then my camera will disappear and we'll have that come up. And folks, feel free as we're going to just drop your questions into the chat for Monica. I'll toss those questions to her as she goes, but we'd love to hear from you and let it be interactive. So drop your questions in as you wish. Looks good.
All right, great. So working here, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service is a part of the Department of the Interior, like the National Park Service and several other bureaus that fall under that umbrella of the Department of the Interior with Fish and Wildlife Service. And one thing that's really unique about the Fish and Wildlife Service is that, apart from other land management agencies, the Fish and Wildlife Service, our primary mission is wildlife conservation. All of the national wildlife refuges across the country, 568 is where we are right now. They make up the National Wildlife Refuge System. And it's about a system of lands and waters that's there to be a network for conserving and managing, protecting, restoring plants, fish, and wildlife and their habitats for the present and future generations. So I just wanted to kind of give that background there. Also, the National Wildlife Refuge System, I put up this map really quickly here. You can see these dots that are kind of all over the United States. And there might be some new dots that we'll need to add to this map. But at this point, all those dots represent national wildlife refuges across the country, as well as in some of the US territories. So you'll see at the bottom, there are refuges in the Pacific Islands, Alaska, Hawaii, the Caribbean islands as well, and Guam. And so we are all over. And this is the National Wildlife Refuge System. The numbers that you see, we're kind of divided up by regions, and these regions, they kind of change, but these are our legacy regions. So there are 9 of them. Our headquarters is in Washington, DC. I am located in South Carolina, so I'm in what we call the South Atlantic portion of the US and in Region 4. And you can see the little map here of South Carolina. And my refuge is kind of almost right there in the middle. So that's where I am. Now, I also put this up because I want to make sure that we talk about how the importance that refuges have to migratory bird conservation. And so I put up this photo right next to the map of refuges so that you could see these migratory bird flyways. And there are 4 of them, and you can see how the refuges line up within these flyways. And so because of where we're located, these are the flyways that migratory birds use to go back and forth between north to south, depending on what time of year it is. They can go all the way north up into Canada, into the Arctic, and to Alaska to breed or nest. And then, they may migrate back down south for the winter, and even into Central and South America. So it's just nice to see, again, the refuges, but to also see the flyways and how the refuges kind of align with them. And so when it comes to migratory birds and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, it's like we go together. We very much go together. A little bit about Santee. Some of this is about Santee, but some of this is about national wildlife refuges in general. So just for Santee, we were established back in 1941, as I mentioned. We have about 13,000 acres here that we manage for as wildlife habitat, and about 300 species of birds that are found here on the refuge. And I just put up our refuge purpose because, one of the first reasons or the most important reasons that the refuge was established was for migratory birds to provide that sanctuary, that place where they are safe from disturbance, that place where they can carry out their life cycle events, be it whether they're here year round or whether they're migrating through, so that refuges provide the resources that migratory birds need. And so this refuge, like many refuges, the Migratory Bird Conservation Act is a part of what establishes these refuges and a big part of our purposes, so that we can conserve and protect them, and again, manage habitat that will provide, the things that are necessary for them throughout their life cycles. I just put this picture up really quick. When it comes to migratory birds, even in our management plans that we do on national wildlife refuges, we have goals so that we can meet the goals of migratory birds. This is just a sample of some of the objectives from, for some of the water birds that we have here at Santee. The first objective, I'm not going to read it, but I just mentioned the wood stork, because in working with migratory birds, some of those species are actually threatened and endangered species. And so here in this area where I am, the wood stork is one that we find on the refuge, and it's one that is listed on our Endangered Species Act. It's a federally threatened, it has federally threatened protection. And so we try to do what we can, again, to provide the habitat that will benefit this particular species and eventually get it to where it has recovered from declines. A lot of species that are threatened or endangered, their populations may be declining because of habitat. It could be food resources. Nowadays, it could be changes in weather or temperature, climate, those kinds of things. And so the wood stork is one of them that we especially try to protect and support here at Santee. Other birds, we work with a number of water birds, wading birds. In the picture above the wood storks are at the bottom. And the top picture is picture of anhingas. And we have several rookeries, so where wading birds nest, where they have babies. And right now it's kind of that time, pretty much from March till about May. They're in trees and in bushes and shrubs, and they've laid nests and they have young now. So we try to do a lot, again, to protect migratory birds, and that is a part of our management. Some of the other specific things that we do on refuges to protect migratory birds include habitat management and restoration. And I'm just going to touch quickly on these 4 things. So some of those things include managing water levels. Depending on what species of water birds you have, we may need to change the water levels. And here at Santee and a lot of other refuges, we have these man-made wetlands called impoundments. And so with these impoundments, we can raise water levels for things like waterfowl, so like ducks and geese and swans. But then we can also lower the water levels in the summertime for wading birds and shorebirds who need less water and need some exposed mud flats so that they're able to find, invertebrates and that kind of food. So we do manage water levels here. We also try to do the best that we can to keep good habitat by controlling invasive species. There's a number of aquatic plants as well as terrestrial plants that are sometimes, not native to our areas. And so we try to manage them or control them so that we can keep the native habitat that is going to be best for migratory birds and other wildlife. We also do some forms of prescribed burning. We also do mowing and even some farming on this refuge. And these are some pictures of those latter activities that I talked about. So prescribed burning is a way for us to help to manage some of our grasslands and shrublands and even some of our forested habitats. The prescribed burning might help to eliminate some of the invasive species I talked about. It might also just help to get the habitat conditions right so that it's not too dense, depending on what a species might need. And then also just by the prescribed burning, once you get that fire going through, it's going to put minerals back into the soil to make that, to make that good soil and to make that a fertile area and healthier habitat. I mentioned mowing and farming as well. And so sometimes there might be fields or areas that maybe we can't always pull off a prescribed burn-in. And so we can try to mow those areas in some cases. And then also we do some planting so that we can provide some additional foods for migratory birds. So here at Santee, we plant rice. We have planted soybeans in the past. We planted corn and winter wheat. So those are things that benefit some of the migratory birds, especially for us, the waterfowl, like the ducks and geese and swans. One of the other things that we do on National Wildlife Refuges is inventory and monitoring. And so we try to, do surveys and do counts of different things. So we'll have individual refuge counts for different species. During the wintertime, we make sure we go out and we count our ducks and our geese, the waterfowl. At other times of the year, we might do breeding bird surveys. A lot of us participate in the Christmas bird count with Audubon during that time of the year. We also do some banding on refuges. We might band, in these pictures here, you can see we're banding mourning doves, we band wood ducks and other types of waterfowl. And so by putting those bird bands on them, of course, we can learn more about their migration. We can also track species and find out sometimes like how long a species might live because it was banded, and it might be reported or might show up in a different area. So that banding information is really important too. And so usually there's some kind of banding that takes place on refuges. And then sometimes we'll have nest boxes, certain species, as I mentioned, there might be some habitat loss. And so like for wood ducks, we have some boxes, on refuges that we try to, again, provide that. They like to nest in tree cavities. So we provide some additional habitat for them. Sometimes people do boxes for songbirds as well. So those are the kinds of things that we try to do, again, to supplement and to conserve, to help migratory birds. And speaking of conservation and protection, in terms of refuges being a sanctuary for migratory birds, sometimes we, like here at Santee, we have waterfowl sanctuaries. Since Santee is a really important place for wintering waterfowl, so pretty much from about November to February, we get all kinds of waterfowl coming here and they spend the winter here. And so during that time, we have certain trails that we will close at that time of year so that will limit, disturbance to those birds at that particular time. But of course, people want to see them as well. And so we'll have observation platforms where people can view them from a distance, but just, not get as close to them as they normally would. We do this for other species of birds too. I stuck in some of my photos from when I worked at Long Island as well, because also for beach nesting birds and shore birds, same thing. Sometimes, our ways of protecting them and helping those populations is by having seasonal closures. So we might close off beaches and again, things so that, birds will be protected from vehicles or from dogs or predators or those kinds of things so that they can be successful during their nesting seasons. In some cases, down at the bottom right picture, there's a picture of an exclosure. That's another way to protect birds. Sometimes predators can be a big issue and they can really have an impact on migratory bird populations. So using exclosures around piping plover nests and other nests so that we can keep predators like fox or coyote or raccoon from getting to the eggs and so that they'll be successful. And then sometimes for us, we can try all we can do all the management we can do the inventorying, we can do those other things, but sometimes the fact that just because it's a national wildlife refuge, it's a safe place for them. And so sometimes, it's just being able to protect, knowing that they're in a protected space. because for us, sometimes, we're able to do more management than other times, or we have more resources and sometimes less resources. But the fact that it's a national wildlife refuge does provide some kind of protection for the majority of migratory birds. And then lastly, I'm just going to talk briefly about research and partnerships, and then we'll do some questions and answers. But this is another way that we try to learn about migratory bird populations on refuges. We work with a number of partners. Anyone who works on a refuge will tell you we can't do it all. We don't have the capacity. We don't always have the staff. Sometimes we don't even have all of the knowledge. And so we work with other folks. We work with universities and colleges. We work with U.S. Geological Survey. We work with our state agencies and many others so that we can, pool together our resources. Some of the pictures that I'm just showing here quickly, up at the top on the left is a picture where you see some folks with a boat and they're in the water. And that was a project where we are doing some restoration, some eelgrass restoration. And eelgrass is an important submerged aquatic vegetation. And so it provides important habitat for fish, but also for migratory birds. And so we're trying to restore some of that habitat in Lake Marion where I am here. Another picture you see, there's a picture of the Canada goose. And so we've worked with some researchers in the past because we had a special subspecies of the Canada goose that was migrating down to South Carolina. And so we put some GPS trackers on those birds so that we could look at their migratory routes, see where they were going up north, and also track them as they come back to the south. One of the pictures there, the top right, that's a picture from one of my very early Fish and Wildlife days, but did a lot of work down in Delaware Bay with shorebirds. And so we're working with some researchers, and there's a little red knot that I'm holding there. And then I just put a picture also at the bottom right of the saltmarsh shark-tailed sparrow, which is now the saltmarsh sparrow name change. But anyway, species like that are facing declines, and research that we're doing and working with others to learn more about them and seeing what we can do to try to benefit them so that those species don't totally disappear on us. So that's a little bit about what I do and a little bit about refuges and migratory bird conservation. So I think I'll stop there, Brianna, and you can let me know if there's any questions at this point.
Yeah, we did get a question actually from Brooke. She's wondering, how would somebody go about getting a job in the National Wildlife Refuge System? Are there certain degree requirements? Where could they start?
That's a good question. So I'll say for myself, I was a wildlife biologist first and now refuge manager. And so there are certain educational requirements that are needed for these positions. I will also say that all of our fish and wildlife positions, the fish and wildlife jobs are announced on USA Jobs, which is like a federal job site. And there's some really good information on there. So it will so when jobs are announced, they'll mention educational requirements and things of that sort. For me, myself, the Fish and Wildlife Service was looking for, they were looking for graduate students to do some research projects. There were some research needs that refuges had. And my advisor in undergrad just happened to pass along a flyer to me. And so that's kind of, by applying for that program, that was kind of my in to Fish and Wildlife, my step in the door to Fish and Wildlife Service. So USA Jobs is one option. There are some other ones. There are some internship programs that we have. Brianna, you might have to help me out. There's some other avenues though as well too, in terms of getting into Fish and Wildlife Service, but maybe starting with USA Jobs, might give you a basis there, and talking to myself or others maybe offline, but we'd be happy to share with you. I will also say this quickly. Even though we have biologists and we have refuge managers, there's a lot of other jobs in Fish and Wildlife Service. We have people, we have people that help manage our facilities, our buildings, our trails, our infrastructure. We have people that, like Brianna, does environmental education, visitor services. So we have a lot of people. I'm sure I'm not naming all of them, but there are a lot of different careers in Fish and Wildlife Service. So maybe depending on what your interest is, we could help steer you in the direction a little bit more after knowing that. Do you want to add anything to that, Brianna?
Yeah, I think USA Jobs is the best place to start. Even some of those internship programs like the Pathways programs, they're all listed there in that one place. I think another great thing to do is look at the partners who are working on the refuges, right? We've got the Student Conservation Association, Mobilize Green, AmeriCorps, there's opportunities to work on those sites and kind of familiarize yourself with them before you, when you're getting ready to apply for those jobs too. It's always good to get your feet wet a little bit. So very cool. So Monica, you had a 20-year career working in biology and working for the service. Tell me if you can think of, the single most cool biology moment that you had in that time. Some kind of cool animal interaction, or what was the best, coolest moment that happened to you in that time?
I would say probably one of the coolest things that I experienced was my first official position with Fish and Wildlife Service was up in Massachusetts on Cape Cod at Monomoy National Wildlife Refuge. And that refuge is known, I mean, there's all kinds of there's a lot of nesting shorebirds there. And we have this huge colony of common terns, something like 10,000 pairs, one of the largest colonies on the Atlantic coast. And for me to just go there and experience that, and not only, and when I say experience, I mean really experience it, because the colony was so important that we would set up an actual field camp. And that was really my first time even camping. But during the summertime, when the birds were nesting there on the refuge, we set up a field camp so that we could be there pretty much every single day. We're doing all kinds of observations and data collection, and looking for predators and interactions and all those kinds of things. So just to be in the midst of a colony of breeding common terns was absolutely amazing. And there are so many birds, it's really noisy. So the birds kind of wake you up in the morning, and then at night they kind of chatter a little bit, and then eventually they go to sleep. So it's just amazing. And there were so many of them. We had to wear hard hats and with little flags, just so they wouldn't peck our heads and stuff. But that was just absolutely amazing. I'd never been around that many birds before. And just to be up close and personal, and just again to look at their behavior, and to see, once the chicks hatch, and just to do all the observations. So to me, that was totally breathtaking, just phenomenal, and something I'll always remember.
That is awesome. I'm a little jealous. How long were you able to stay on that camp? Was it like a couple of days trip or something like that?
Yeah, so we kind of did shifts.
Okay.
We did shifts, and usually the shift was about 5 days at a time. So you'd have 5 days that you'd be on the island in the field camp, and then you have 2 days off. And so while you were there, like I said, we had camp set up. So you brought your food. We had a cook tent, and then we had a sleep tent. So yeah, and then you get your days off so that you could kind of go get your supplies, and then you come back on and you do it again. And we did that from about May to August every year.
Wow. That's a life experience right there.
Yep.
Monica, you did get a shout out from Patrice Anderson. She said, thank you so much for the presentation. She is a teacher, and was looking forward to relaying information to her students who are K through 12, who love nature and science, and are, looking forward to choosing some career paths as well.
Excellent.
Yes. So you're at Santee now, and 13,000 acres. It's a massive refuge. And I'm assuming you've been able to get out and about a little bit, even though you're new there. So what is your favorite spot on the refuge? Can you just describe it to us, kind of take us there a little bit in your head?
Let's see. One of my favorite spots is I can leave my office and kind of drive down this road. And down the road, there's some nice fields. There's some nice grassland fields where we get meadowlarks and bobolinks and some other grassland birds, and even we'll get short-eared owls in the wintertime. And then once you kind of get past the fields, it's right on the edge of Lake Marion. Lake Marion is it's the largest lake in the state of South Carolina, and it's a part of the refuge. And so there's a little spot where I can just kind of drive up to and just look out over the lake. And as I look out over the lake, there are these bald cypress trees, and they're just big and majestic, and they're just there. And it's just really quiet and very peaceful. And it's just kind of like a little corner spot. So you're kind of away from, where you're kind of away from the hiking trail and away from everything else. And so sometimes I just like to just take a little drive there and just kind of look out and just, let the stress level come down. Yeah. But that's one of my favorite spots.
That's the good part about working on a wildlife refuge, right? Whenever you get too stressed in the office, find a spot, park, take a deep breath, right? I also love seeing bobolinks. I've always heard them called tuxedo birds for the little black and white look. Do you have a single favorite bird, Monica? Any certain bird that's just the one for you? I know it's a hard question.
I would say my single favorite bird, and it's my favorite bird because it's the first shorebird that I learned to identify when I was down in Delaware, and that would be the semi-palmated plover.
Ooh, okay.
So semi-palmated plover, it's a, it's a little tiny shorebird. It's brown, but it's really, like I said, is one of the first ones I learned to identify. And I just, I've been fascinated with them. So I like shorebirds. That's kind of where I started out. But everywhere I go, I feel like I'm always around a lot of water birds, but I love all birds. But I would say that's probably my favorite shorebird, the semi-palmated plover.
Okay, that's a unique bird to be your favorite. I like it. I like it. Besides, the first one that you learned is also like the best one. The first
Yeah.
one I learned was a goldfinch, and now even now when I see them, I'm like, "Oh, goldfinch. Like they feel like my friends when I see them. Not my favorite, but also like in my top 5 birds. I think it would be the goldfinch. If you got questions for Monica, feel free to drop them into the chat as well. We would love to hear from you. Thanks to those who've already commented in and dropped some things. So what else do you want to know from her? Monica, while we're waiting, I'll ask you another one.
Okay.
We've got folks from watching from all over the country. And as you mentioned, birds are migrating across the country, all the time. What can people who are just regular folks who aren't biologists, what can they do to help out migratory birds? What are some kind of low threshold, easy ways to support migratory birds?
Okay. Well, I would say, trying to decide where to go with this.
I know there's a
Let's see.
lot. There's a lot.
Well, I'm going to start with your yard. So
Okay.
maybe a good way that you can start out with help migratory birds is maybe just think about maybe some of the plants that you have in your yard. So I think about like say like the ruby-throated hummingbirds, some of our other some of our other songbirds or whatever. So maybe just having some nice native plants in your yard that produce nice flowers so they can get nectar, or maybe just nice like native berries or seeds or whatever. That's a good way. I do know that some people like to have bird feeders, and that's a good way to help birds kind of get through the winter. They might need a little extra food, and that's also a good way to kind of see them. We just have to make sure we keep those bird feeders nice and clean, but having bird feeders and nice native plants, I would say that would be one thing that we can do. Also, I would say, things like littering. We should be careful about littering. When I think about birds, when I think about some of the birds that we work with, in some cases, we've done some necropsies and just seeing like unfortunately, a lot of litter and trash that ends up in the water or even on land. Migratory birds can be impacted by those kinds of things. So just not littering. It sounds simple, but there are people that still do it. So I would say just try to make sure don't throw things out into the water or just outside the road. So try not to litter. Have some nice native plants. There are good ways to do some nice bird feeders around your yard too for birding. So those are some simple things that we could do to help migratory birds. I'm not sure if I should go here, Brianna, but I was going to talk about the things that people can do on national wildlife refuges. Some people obviously might be familiar with them, but others may not. So I did have a slide to talk a little bit about some of the good things that people can do in terms of being able to enjoy the migratory birds that we have here and enjoy other parts of the refuge and other wildlife as well. Should I go there?
I think so. I want to ask you one quick question
Sure.
that came in. Janae asked, how do you suggest cleaning these feeders? Is it scrubbing them down with water, or do you have any suggestions for feeder maintenance to keep them clean?
Yeah, it's just kind of basic things like just making sure they're clean, because sometimes like once you put the bird feed in, like after a while it'll kind of get cakey at the bottom or kind of crusty, at different parts. So yeah, just cleaning out with some soap and water, that pretty much works. And you don't have to do that every single time, but you'll notice like, maybe once every so often, every so many weeks, or at least once a month, that you just keep those keep the bird feeders clean. And that's important too. Not only, that's important for the birds so that they don't, pick up any kinds of, get sick or spread disease, those kinds of things. But soap and water normally does it.
Yeah, soap and water is always good. I've even had good luck with like a vinegar solution, just like a vinegar diluted with water and kind of wiping that through there. It keeps mold and things like that off of them. Tanya also mentioned she would think maybe not taking pictures with the flash with birds, not getting too close to them. Is that important when you're out looking for them?
Absolutely, it's really important, and thank you for those prompters. Thank you for the prompters, because the things are there, but you can't always think of them. But yes, so yeah, try not to disturb birds. So obviously, you want to be able to see them and enjoy them, but not getting too close, because our behavior, when we get really close, it changes their behavior. It could cause them to stress. It could cause, an adult to leave a nest. It could also, by us getting too close, an adult could leave a nest, a predator could come by. So those kinds of things. So absolutely right. So trying to limit our distance, trying not to stay in an area too long. So all those things are helpful as well.
Awesome. If you got more questions, go ahead and drop them in. Monica, if you want to, why don't you share that last bit about what folks can do when they're visiting refuges too?
Sure. So again, while wildlife conservation is our primary mission, we obviously, like I said, we definitely want people to go outside and enjoy wildlife and see them. And so for the Fish and Wildlife Service, we have this thing called the Refuge Improvement Act of 1997. And the things that are listed here are the 6 primary public uses that most refuges try to accommodate. And I say try to accommodate because we want to make sure that people are able to enjoy refuges, but at the same time, we don't want to allow activities that could be detrimental to them or activities that could harm them in a negative way. And so we go for these fish and wildlife, type oriented activities. And so things like hunting and fishing are really popular on most refuges. Wildlife observation, be it bird watching or just, observing other kinds of wildlife. We do environmental education and interpretation. And I'm sure Brianna can speak to these, but with interpretation, we have signs, we'll have signage on refuges, not only directional signs, but we'll have interpretive panels about the things that you might be seeing along a trail. Like at marker number 6, you might see, hey, if you look up, you'll see a bald eagle nest or whatever the case might be. So we try to talk about the things that you'll see while you're out and about on a National Wildlife Refuge. And a lot of that happens through signs or kiosks or those kinds of things. In some cases, you might actually have a person that will be able to go out with you, a park ranger that can actually go with you and give you a guided tour as well. And for environmental education, we'll have school groups out, and sometimes there's certain curricula, certain things that we can do, work with school groups and school districts so that, lessons that they might be learning in the classroom, they're able to come out to the refuge, come outside and maybe see how that might, see how that plays out. Learning about pollinators or seeing, monarch butterflies in the wild or those kinds of things. And this is Brianna's specialty, environmental ed and interpretation. So you can certainly feel free to add to that, Brianna.
Yeah, definitely. Environmental education is a huge point, and it's two-folded, right? We can learn about nature and explore it and kind of learn it from a story standpoint, but also from an educational point. EE is all about using the things students are needing to know, their curriculum and what they didn't know for testing, and merging it with nature, right? Bringing the classroom outside and letting them kind of come together and be seamless. So the outdoors, in my opinion, is an endless teacher, right? There's so much that we can learn from nature and that students can learn from nature. I know I had someone earlier chat in that they were a teacher and work with K through 12 students, but just getting outside and getting students out there is a great part, and learning alongside them, not feeling like we have to know everything in order to go outside with kids. Even if you have kids of your own, go outside and just wander around and learn with them. There's so many great apps. You can take photos of things on your phone and send it in, and find out what it is and just, explore and get to know things. Awesome. I think we got a couple more comments in here, Monica, I wanted to share with you. Tanya is also rolling off some other ideas about how we could protect birds and help them out, keeping a distance with our dogs. If we see a bird that needs help, letting the rangers know, right? Tracking birds on eBird and other sources, and even recording the numbers of birds can impact legislation and funding. Can you speak a little bit about, funding and how that stuff works and how it's all tied together, our research with birds, and how that impacts decision making?
Sure. So, when I talked a little bit about, kind of the inventory and monitoring, that's one of the ways it's going to help us to learn more about migratory bird populations. And so by getting that information, that lets us know, maybe like if a population is stable and doing well, if a population might be declining, it might need some help, or if we're seeing an increase, in things that, if we're seeing some kind of change or whatever. And then obviously, based on, kind of the results of those surveys and such, then we can start to reach out for funding, because, sometimes those surveys will warrant, additional research. We might need to elevate things to see if it needs to be evaluated to be on the threatened and endangered species list. We can also start to work with other partners to put together proposals, research proposals. And then also in terms of our, budgets and staffing, if, depending on what the needs are, whatever, sometimes money can get, shifted to wherever that need might be. So if there is a need to do more research or a need to provide some additional protection or whatever the case might be, then fund, that will hopefully line up with funding. Sometimes we have to be creative with funding because those funds have to go in a lot of different directions, not just for research, but for salaries and maintaining trails and buildings and vehicles and all the other things that go along with operating a refuge. So I think that's probably all I can add on the funding piece, but that's a loaded question, but that's a little bit.
No, it makes a lot of sense. What you're doing and the biology that you're learning about is fueling a lot of other actions to help birds as well, even more than just what's happening on your site. So it's awesome to know. I will ask you, Monica, as we're kind of wrapping up, and if you have a question for Monica, send that in as soon as you can. Do you have a pro tip for the beginner birder? What somebody who's kind of new to birding, wants to kind of get to know more birds or start bird watching, give us a pro tip or a little tidbit of advice for them?
I think if you can find a nice spot in Sheridan and Deja they did an awesome job. And the other young lady, they did the birds on the block. They did an awesome job with that. But what I would just say, to me, observation is really important. So if you can, just being outside, you can just go somewhere and sit there, outside. It could be on a picnic bench. You could be at a park, wherever, even at your house, even like just sitting on your front porch or in your backyard, just sitting there and just being quiet for a little bit. You can listen. And one of the things we try to teach kids is that you learn to listen, you learn to look around, so you kind of just learn to use your senses. And I think when you just take that time just to sit and be still, I think that's a good way to observe birds, because once you're sitting and somewhat still, then if something comes up, then if you have your binoculars, you can take a closer look. And they might stay around a little bit. You can take a closer look. Perhaps you could get a picture. Perhaps you could notice something unique about this bird's behavior. Perhaps you might see more. You might notice that the bird might have young, or there might be, a group of them together. But I would just say, from our busy lives, just taking a little bit of time just to be still and sit quietly, and then just kind of observe, look and listen. So it sounds simple, but it works.
So true. And like birding is also a little bit of self-care, right? That's just like sitting quietly, being mindful and letting things happen around you. That's one of my favorite things when
stress
I start
management.
Yes, stress management. Like to sit in that spot. I use my backyard right here, and I just feel like the more you sit quietly, nature just kind of folds in around you even closer, right? Birds start coming by, and you see so much more when you can just relax and be patient for a little bit.
Yes.
Awesome. Monica, thank you so much. Any last things you want to share with us? Any last comments? Shanae saying thanks for that's great advice for some natural therapy. What do you want to leave us with, Monica? Anything else you want to say before we sign off for the afternoon?
I'm just excited. So I'm thankful, first of all, for this opportunity, and, just to kind of be a voice for refuges, and to know that, as a wildlife refuge manager, I feel like I'm that mediator, I'm that voice for the migratory birds and for the other wildlife, and, just trying to work really hard to do the things that are going to, help these wildlife populations and these migratory birds to be successful and to be around for future generations. So I think it's an awesome opportunity and an awesome task. So I'm very grateful to be in this position, and I'm just looking forward to, what else, looking forward to what the future, to how things will unfold here, at Santee. And like I said, I'm looking forward to making a lot more connections with young people and in the community. So I'm excited. So thank you again for this opportunity.
Yes, and we appreciate you, Monica. I want to say thank you to you. I know as a refuge manager, you got a small staff and a big site to manage. You are busy, but thank you for taking some time to talk with us at Black AF and STEM and to share with us during Black Birders Week. You're getting lots of comments just to say thank you for what you do, and thank you for presenting and sharing with us as well. So we really appreciate you taking the time. If you'd like to get more information about Santee, the link was dropped earlier for their refuge website. You guys also have a Facebook page, I'm assuming, Monica, is that right?
Facebook page is not maintained at this point.
Go for the website then, right? We got lots to do. We're trying to preserve birds. We don't have time for Facebook.
Well, it's just lack of staff and yeah, just other things to do. But yeah, but if you go to the website, you'll see, you'll see our phone number there. This is old school. I don't have any hashtags or I'm not really on social media very much. But if you go to the website, there's phone number there, there's address. And if you call, I'm probably going to answer the phone because like I said, I'm the only one that's really, kind of in the office here. My other guys are out in the field. But anyway, if you want to get in touch with me, feel free to call or look on the website, get the contact information. But I'd be happy to talk to anyone else or, any follow-up questions or suggestions.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I appreciate you making yourself available too. If you are online on social media, you're welcome to follow the Black Birders Week hashtags, right? Today's theme is On Their Wings, and we're looking to hear stories about the folks who connected you to nature and who is going forward in the future. Also the youth as well, who are taking us forward on their wings too. You can learn more about the rest of the week. We've got one more day of Black Birders Week 2021, a great presentation to come out tomorrow with Jerome Ford, who is the Assistant Director of Migratory Birds for the entire nation. He'll be presenting tomorrow afternoon at 3 o'clock. So you can visit our website at blackafinstem.com for more information. And if you'd like to, you can follow me online at Ranger_Bree on Instagram and Twitter. I'll be sharing all the links and everything you need for the rest of the week and beyond for nature exploration. And we are very happy to bring this week to you all. And we thank you, Monica, on behalf of all the birds and the people.
Thank
and
you, everybody.
We'll see you all on our next program. Awesome. All right, and this recording will be available, just so you know, too. We'll have it online.
Awesome.
Thanks, Monica.
Yep. Bye.
Bye, everybody.